And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Kwinitsa was one of the hundreds of railway stops on the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway. The GTB, built in the early 1900s, spanned close to 5,000 kilometers, following the rivers between Winnipeg and Prince Rupert. At mile 48.2, the Kwinitsa stop was one of 10 in the Skeena subdivision, the section of railroad between Terrace and Prince Rupert. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1985.
This is where a piece of Northwest rail heritage resides now, in a prime location on Prince Rupert's waterfront. But Kwinitsa Station first captured the attention of Skeena Journal last winter, when it was learned the once important link on CN's northern main line was slated for demolition. That's when the city of Prince Rupert took the first important steps to rescue the 74-year-old station.
Hello, Kwinitsa.
Kwinitsa.
Okay, Kwinitsa, here's the lineup on the Skeena sub trains between Terrace and Prince Rupert. Say when you're ready.
All set.
Okay, eastward on the Skeena sub. Extra east. Leave Prince Rupert. 1100. 11 knot. Run.
Sitting halfway between the communities of Prince Rupert and Terrace on the CN main line is Kwinitsa Station. It's a fairly unassuming building, and not everyone realizes it was built way back in 1911. CN will no longer have a use for the station when the mainline expansion takes place this summer. If something isn't done with the station, it will be demolished. One of the key people involved in researching Kwinitsa's history is Museum of Northern BC curator Ron Denman.
The Kwinitsa Station goes back to 1911. It was built in 1911. Between 1911 and 1915, there were over 50 stations in British Columbia that were built to the same design. Gradually, over the years, most of them have disappeared. There's actually only 4 left now, and Kwinitsa is one of them. Kitwangaa is another one in this area that people would be familiar with, and Dunster and Goat River are 2 other stations of the same design. It's Type E design, it's called, that are left.
Is Kwinitsa the oldest of those 4?
It's the oldest remaining Type E station in British Columbia.
And who built that originally?
It was the Grand Trunk Station. It was built to a standard design, and it's certainly been used by the Grand Trunk and the CNR since then.
What happened to all the rest?
They've all, over the years, been declared surplus to CNR needs and have disappeared as the need has been reduced for station or line managers along the route, and also as they're switching over to automated systems. There's no longer the need for people in stations to direct the traffic flowing along the CNR line. So they've all gradually disappeared for that reason.
What kind of a function does the station serve in the past and right now?
In the past, it was a railroad station where people hopped on and hopped off. The station inside has a small waiting room and a little baggage area and a small area for a telegraph operator. There were telegraph operators in all the stations, and then living quarters for the telegraph operator and his family. There's 2 floors. A couple of bedrooms on the upper floor, and then a small kitchen facility in the back part of the building. I think essentially now what the stations are used for is the person who's at the Kwinitsa station right now, I think they're essentially performing a traffic function. In other words, watching trains that go by in either direction, making sure that there's not going to be a train run into another train.
Does the station look much as it does now as it did in 1913?
It's almost essentially the same as it was in that early period. The only changes that physically have been made to it that are quite obvious are that it was stuccoed in 1937. I dare say if the stucco's removed, you'll find the original clapboard underneath it, and it was also insulated in 1937, but and certainly it's been painted a number of times inside since then, but it's the original floor design and still pretty well the original wood inside. It's a very good station to actually restore. It'd be relatively easy compared to some other buildings.
Why did they stucco it?
I imagine because both the stuccoing and the insulation occurred at the same time, that had something to do with howling winds down the Skeena River and trying to keep whoever was inside warm.
Do historians throw up their arms when they find something like that has been done and something is not in its original condition?
I don't think so. I mean, that's part of an evolution of a building. Buildings change, and if the Kwinitsa Station Relocation Committee is interested in restoring the building to its original condition. Now, another way of looking at older buildings is that they do evolve, and they do change. The history of the building lies in the changes that have occurred, so you can choose the philosophy of maintaining the building to a particular point in time, whether that's 1911 or 1937 or 1984. You're still keeping an original building.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. One of the biggest challenges to building restoration is that each country has its own terminology, standards, regulations, and oversights which impact every restoration process. As a result, there's no international set of standards. Conservators often follow best practices in the restoration process. Let us return to the archives as they discuss the restoration process.
Does the museum or does the town around have, if they wanted to restore it to earlier years, do they have enough artifacts to make it a go?
Oh, definitely. I think there's enough around. There's certainly telegraph equipment where the telegraph office itself could be completely furnished. The waiting room itself, there's not much really that needs to be done inside that. Perhaps some old posters could be found and railway schedules. There's still really an old oil stove that's used as a cooking stove in the station itself, and that's probably been in there for years and years. I couldn't say how long at this point. There still has to be some research done if we can locate some photographs of the interior of the building in that early period. That would be very useful to us. But I don't foresee any problem at all setting up a small display in there.
And this is a project you've been waiting to get your hands on for a number of years now, I guess.
Well, it's one that certainly the museum and the directors of the museum have thought about. I think that there's certainly, with the formation of the relocation committee, there's now a much broader group of people who are interested in saving the station, and I think that's good.
Moving a railway station isn't something you can just say you're going to do and then do it. The oddities of our Northwest transportation systems made the Kwinitsa move a detailed operation with several steps. Kwinitsa Station Relocation Committee member Jack Musalem tells us about some of the restraints.
This whole project is being done as a community project for Prince Rupert. We have contracted with Mr. Fred Watson of Northern Building Movers Limited of Smithers, and Mr. Watson is in the process now of moving the station. You can see it sitting on his truck behind us here. We've closed the railway and the highway for a specific period of time this morning. The station will be traveling by truck down the highway and then onto a barge, and then will be towed down to Prince Rupert waterfront. Once we're on the barge, we feel we'll be towing for about 8 hours.
Why couldn't you just put it on a truck originally and move it down?
We have one problem with the BC Hydro power line towers, which come from Falls River, where they have a power plant, and the station cannot fit through the closed portion where the road runs through the base of one of the towers.
And it can't be moved by rail either?
We've looked at doing that also. That seems to be more cumbersome and would entail more work. It appears that trucking it down and then onto a barge would be the easiest way to go.
Canada Day promised to be clear and sunny, a perfect day for moving a railway station down the Skeena River. A lot of volunteer services and materials went into the move, and there are already some tentative plans for its restoration.
And we're hoping to get it back to its look of 1911, inside and outside. We may end up taking the stucco off the building. That hasn't been decided. There's hardwood floors inside. They've now all been covered with a linoleum floor covering. And there's also 1x4 cedar and fir strips on the walls, so we may take the paint off those, get them right back to the way it looked before. This project is being done through donations from over 39 companies, and when you consider companies and individuals, we have over 45 participating. They're all donating money, manpower, equipment, and expertise, as you can see here. The only company getting paid is, of course, the building mover, who is Mr. Fred Watson.
Jack was Salem from Rupert. He gave me a call and to come down and have a look at the building and see if it was feasible to move it to Rupert. So I came down and we looked at the building, and the building was sound, and then we came down and looked at a spot where we could put on a barge, and it looked good. And then at the other end, we had unloading area, so it was practical. And the price, it wasn't even indicative of the price. They quoted him a fairly low price because it was for a good cause, and I wanted to be involved in moving a landmark like the old train station in Kwinitsa. These old buildings, it's awful hard to estimate the weight of them. You can generally, newer buildings, you can come fairly close in the weight. In this train station being built, they use a lot of shiplap, extra walls in it, and the plaster on the outside, it's steel wire and about 1.5 inches thick. So I was about 20 to 30 ton out in my estimate on the weight of it. The building itself weighs about 80 ton, and with my truck and dollies, and it would be about 100 ton load. And of course, the truck is not really designed for pulling 100 ton on it, so we had to have a wrecker and so forth and so on. But it moved along very well. At the other end, it looks pretty good because it's hard ground, and it should, coming off, you generally have a downhill grade, so it'll come off very good, no problems. And the train station is something I've never had one before, so it was quite a challenge. I really enjoyed it. It was just something that you get into and work at it, and it works out generally pretty good. We just put it together, and here it is. It's on a barge, on its way to Rupert.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. In some ways, the Kwinitsa railway station and Foreman's house are nothing special. They are both designed simply and are typical of Western Canadian railway structures. But now, more than 50 years after they prime, they are considered rare and precious historical artifacts, only because two of the only historic railway buildings are left standing in the region. Let us return to the archives as Kwinitsa Station makes its way west.
The station arrived in Prince Rupert at 7 on the evening of July 1st for a combined Canada Day Kwinitsa Station celebration. Nancy Wilson is chairman of the Kwinitsa Station Relocation Committee. Wilson has been interested in Kwinitsa since 1979 during her term on the board of directors of the Prince Rupert Visitors Bureau. That's when the Bureau first contacted CN advising the company of the interest in acquiring Kwinitsa Station.
We chose July 1st because it was the closest date to the time that Kwinitsa Station was going to become available. With the Tyee overpass and everything being completed, and CN is looking into increasing their trackage, that Kwinitsa Station no longer could stay there. And so we chose July 1st as a celebration day. Well, it seems like an awful lot of work for such a short time. An excellent committee. We had to meet with the City Council, I'd say at least 6 times. They approved our report immediately, but like most activity, it's the funding that's the problem. And the City of Prince Rupert, like any other organization, has to be very careful where the funding is placed. And so we did have to go to the city. Most of this has been funded by donations and voluntary equipment and personnel. We have funding in place from Canada Works of approximately $60,000 to begin our restoration. That money is available to us next week, but we can't start the restoration until the Kwinitsa Station is in its permanent location. So approximately 3 months from now, we anticipate the restoration to be done within 6 months, and hopefully it'll be ready to the public next year. It will be made into a railroad museum. This is primarily what we are intending to do with it. We'll also have a very elaborate model train display. Part of it you can see downtown in one of the stores being displayed, but it is a massive project. And what they plan to do is to depict the terrace, Kwinitsa, Tyee, Rupert area with working models, steam engines, and it will be just a super display. I think what we decide to put in there will strictly be up to the committee, and we'd like to put audiovisual in there because I think this way you can get history to the people. Not only can they see it, but they can see it in the movies, they can see it in, right in front of them, and I think that's history.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Railroad tracks cut through almost community in the region and affect our lives daily, whether we notice it or not. In Terrace, the railroad divides the town into Horseshoe and South Side. In Smithers, the tracks lie at the mountain's edge, separating the town from nature. Similarly, in Prince Rupert, they divide the city from the ocean. In this final segment of Open Connection, we discover how the station is faring in its new surroundings.
This is Kwinitsa Station. Anyone driving down Highway 16 in the past would have found it about halfway in between Terrace and Prince Rupert. But in an extraordinary effort last summer, this building, constructed in 1911, was moved to its present location here on Prince Rupert's waterfront. This was the scene last July when a lot of volunteer time and effort was put into the huge task of moving a complete railway station onto a barge and right down the Skeena River to Prince Rupert. It was a little dicey as the mover had underestimated the weight of the building by several tons. They don't make stucco now like they used to. The railway station faced demolition because Canadian National didn't need it anymore and it would be in the way of expansion plans. The city of Prince Rupert secured the station for the sum of $1. Since the station arrived on Prince Rupert's waterfront, a lot of work has been going on to restore the 1911 building and turn it into a railway museum. $60,000 of Canada Works funding has been spent. The city of Prince Rupert donated about $22,000 toward the restoration and another $20,000 toward last year's move of the station to Rupert. Nancy Wilson is the chairman of the Kwinitsa Station Relocation Committee. She's very pleased with the progress of the project and tells us what has been done so far.
I think one of our greatest accomplishments was to find so many good workers who were prepared to work for next to nothing pay. And the people were all experienced. We had people who have been carpenters for 20 years, and Canada Works doesn't pay very good salary, but we've had four workers who have spent the whole time here. And it's because of people like that we managed to get this restored.
Can you give us a summary of what has been involved in the restoration?
Well, I think what we had to do was first off get it down to its original state. So what they had to do was strip the paint, get all the dirt out, the rotten material and such. And then of course you have to sort of dig out the plans. What did it look like back then? And if you look at it now, there isn't too much difference than when we first walked in there, other than it's cleaner and it's newer.
What about the final resting place of Kwinitsa Station?
We had hoped that it would have been settled by now, but what will probably happen is that there's an area over there, and I think that's where it will go. It's just on the other side of the lightering facility. But if we do have to move it, it's not too big of a job. I think we've left it up so that, a truck can go in under it and just move it over.
So it won't be quite as difficult as the first move.
I don't think so, but the first move went really well too. So, other than the massive amount of work and coordination and the volunteer work that went into it, I think it was a real good, easy move. It was a successful move too.
Who has to get together on this to determine where it's going to be?
I would think that it's the CN and the city and the port, the three major people involved in the waterfront. Ultimately, it is the CN that has the final decision on where it would go, and they have assured us that they will find a place for it on the waterfront.
Are you pleased with the work of your committee so far?
Oh, absolutely. The committee is finished at the end of this month, and I think it's been one of the finest committees I've ever worked with, very dedicated. I think it's hard to find another committee like that.
Russell Collier is the exhibit planner for the Railway Museum. He'd like to see the station move to its final resting place before any exhibits go in to minimize the possibility of damage in transit. He has a lot of exhibits planned and has some artifacts, but he'd like to see even more. You think there are a lot of artifacts out there that people don't realize that they have them?
Oh, I'm sure. For example, those nice CN lanterns. A lot of people have them for their father or their uncle or their grandfather or somebody in the family's had one kicking around for a long time, and they're nice. They work very well, and we could sure use one or two of those.
When do you think you'll have this in shape for people to come and visit it?
Well, I'm expecting by summertime anyhow. It won't be open immediately, but immediately following the completion of the project, but I'm certainly expecting people in by summertime to look at the railway history of the area.
The station will be a welcome addition to Prince Rupert's waterfront and its heritage. No matter where its final resting place, railway buffs of all ages will get a good look at how towns and the Northwest and the railway all develop together.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here or there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.